Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. This is a pretty important one. We at last have one of the new Avatar comics announced. We have some new story content coming out, and we'll get to that in just a second. One smaller piece of news to cover before that is this one. The Avatar The Last Airbender Imbalance LIbrary Edition, the hardcover collection of Imbalance, has been delayed. The new date is now June 3rd, 2020 for comic book stores. And then over here on Edelweiss we can see that it's June 16th for normal bookstores, the mass market release. So previously this book was scheduled to come out May 13th/26th, comic book store mass market. So it's been pushed back by 3 weeks or so. And I suppose this is one of those things where the library editions rarely get delayed. This isn't really something that's a regular occurrence for Dark Horse. So more than likely this might be them just pushing it back a couple of weeks because of what's happening with the virus currently. Just so it they push it out so that I suppose maybe more people have the opportunity to get it once maybe things start to calm down with that over the next few months. And that's fine. Usually I'd come in here and be very critical of Dark Horse for delaying books, but this one, I suppose there's potentially a reason behind it. We don't know it's because of that, but most of the time there's other specific reasons behind why there's delays. This one I think makes a little bit more sense. Now, as for the main news of this video, it is the announcement of this book here. Avatar The Last Airbender, Katara and the Pirates Silver, by Faith Erin Hicks, illustrated by Peter Wortman, and colors by Adele Matera. This is the book that we were being teased about. This is the book that the Imbalance team, who we thought were doing a new 3-part series, they're actually just doing a one-shot. Because you notice the title there doesn't have a part 1, 2, or 3 in it. So it is a one-shot graphic novel. That's very, very interesting, but let's go through it. So, it says here, October 13th, 2020. We don't know specifically what way they're doing the dates for this book, in that is a Tuesday, meaning it is the mass market release date, but we don't know if they're going to treat this like a Team Avatar Tales, or if they're going to treat this like one of the part books. Because if it's treated like one of the parts, the comic book store release date is probably going to be October 14th, the day afterwards. If they're treating it like Team Avatar Tales and the library editions and so on, it would be 13 days before this. So it would be the very last day in September would be the comic book store release date, and then this is the mass market one. We'll see how that plays out. Either way, we have a sense for when the book is coming out. It's still a while off, but it's coming. That's at least something. We'll quickly cover the product details down here. Paperback $12.99. Let me just check something very quickly with this. Yeah, so this is Imbalance Part 2, which is listed as $10.99 for a Part 1. Yet this book is listed as $12.99 for a part. So that is something to keep in mind, that they're potentially putting this out there as a more expensive book. Let me just check the stats on this. 6x9, 80 pages, yes. 6x9, 80 pages. So the same amount of content, but they are charging $2 more. That's interesting. If that holds and it does come out and it is a slightly more expensive book, for what reason, I suppose? They're just upping the price because it's a one-off? That seems kind of weird to me. So I think that's something to keep in mind in all of this, that it is a one-shot, what the story is, and they're charging more for it. That's important. So let's get into the description now. It's sink or swim for Katara. When Team Avatar is suddenly ambushed by the Fire Nation, Katara gets separated from the group. Unable to rendezvous with Aang, Toph, and Sokka, Katara must avoid capture by aligning herself with some unlikely allies. The normally sweet and sensitive Katara will need to explore her tougher side if she's going to reunite with the rest of Team Avatar. Written by Faith Erin Hicks and drawn by Peter Wortman, with colours by Adele Matera and letters by Comicraft's Jimmy Betancourt, in collaboration with Avatar The Last Airbender animated series writer Tim Hendricks. That's very interesting. No mention of Mike and Brian here in the description, but Tim Hendricks is the one giving oversight on this book. That is interesting. His name has been included on some of the more recent books as being one of the collaborators. So was that all about shifting things from Mike and Brian over to Tim Hendricks for the comics while Mike and Brian are working on the Netflix show? It's hard to speculate on that, in that this could be like he's overseeing these new like one-off books. It's hard to know really for sure, but that's the reveal. Let's get into it here. Let's explore. Let's go into detail on the text and what it implies, and then we'll talk about the cover. So immediately, what you take from that, in addition to the cover, is that it's set during Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's clearly set at some point during book 2, because they mention Toph. Katara's outfit is clearly not book 3 Katara, and obviously it's not book 1. So somewhere in the middle of book 2, this is where this is set. Again, we'll probably have to get more context to understand where exactly it's set. So it's just at some point after, Toph's introduction in The Blind Bandit, and probably, before the whole Ba Sing Se arc. So it has to be somewhere between episode 5 and episode, 10 is the library, is where this has to be set. And, there's probably a space for it somewhere in the middle. We'll see exactly where. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like fairly shortly after Toph joins the group. Because especially before, I think, like Bitter Work, I think there's a little bit of a gap there to do something. But we'll see. I doubt they'll place it that perfectly. It'll just be probably more generally in a region. So it's a solo story with Katara. She gets separated from the group after an attack by the Fire Nation, which is another sign that it's set during the series, because, why would the Fire Nation be attacking the group if it was set post ATLA? So she's forced to ally herself with the pirates, and I suppose help them to find treasure. Now, the question here is obviously going to be, is it the pirates that we know from, like, book 1, or is it other pirates? For this sort of reference, I suppose people might like the pirates that we already know about, but it would probably be more interesting as a book if it were different pirates. Because, like, we saw, like, actual pirates explored in the Rise of Kyoshi novel, and they felt, like, much more interesting as characters than the mainly comedy, little bit serious pirates that we have in the show. So it'll be interesting to see what exact approach that they take. Just based off the cover, I don't know if we can immediately recognize that boat, so maybe it is a different group of pirates. It probably will be, just so you allow Katara to not maybe have to deal with the previous experience with those pirates. But, maybe they'll link that into it. We'll see. I'm not particularly sure how I feel about this as the direction we're going with the next comic. I think this is where I'll bring in the fact that this book was just revealed on Penguin Random House. I'm not just linking this because it's an effective way to show it here. This is the source of the information. Penguin Random House just put up this listing, and that's how we know about this. This wasn't revealed on any website. I'm going to assume at some point in the next few days, some website like Comic Book Resources or something like that, maybe even IGN, will put up a post exclusively revealing this book, even though we've already seen it. It's happened fairly recently with some of these reveals, in that, like, the Promise Library Edition, the Promise Omnibus Edition, I think, was like that, or else it was the Turf. Actually, it was the Turf Wars. The Runes of the Empire Library Edition happened like this, where a different site got the exclusive reveal, even though we saw it already. So I expect an article to go up probably explaining more about what this is, because I can't see Dark Horse just letting the announcement be the product listing for this book when there probably needs to be an explanation of why they've decided to sort of switch the team that did a 3-part book over to they're doing a one-shot book. And like, does this mean they're the regular team and that after this they're immediately going on to another one-shot book? Like, is Faith Erin Hicks and Peter Wortman still the team on the Avatar books, given that we know Peter Wortman is done on this book as far as we're aware? He recently posted finishing art on a book, and we knew he was working on Avatar, involving Katara. So, you know, are they still going ahead with this? Is that like, has that like potentially they're the regular team, they're doing 3-part books, turned into now they're on board for the next 3 one-shots, or what? Because this is where I'll bring in this interview we got a few weeks ago that involved Rachel Roberts, the editor on the Avatar and Korra books. And the question is like, what are the future plans for the comics? We're not quite ready to share specific news yet, but I think fans of both Avatar and Korra will be quite pleased with what we're cooking up. We have several fun new projects in the works that will not only expand our publishing line, but will introduce new formats and approaches to these beloved franchises. So clearly this is a different approach, doing one book to cover one story. Now, they say new formats, that they're introducing multiple different styles, and multiple new styles is not 3-part books and then 1-part books, meaning we're still expecting another format, whether that be a 2-part book or even a longer form book or different types of books. We're still waiting for a huge announcement because they're teasing that they have a big publishing line of Avatar stuff, and to me that suggests it's more than just 2 books, more than just 3 books, that there's something big that they have planned in this, the 20th year, the 15-year anniversary of the franchise. So we'll go back over here to our Katara book. Like, I'm excited. I'm an Avatar fan. I'm a big Katara fan. I'm excited for this book, but it's not what we need right now at all. Like, we don't need to go back into Avatar, because immediately that tells us this is only going to be a somewhat minor story. Like, I doubt they're going to be able to make anything particularly impactful with this story, unless they have some important Katara backstory about some different part of her life to go on. I'm not really sure how exactly this is going to work, because again, if they're slotting into Avatar, it suggests that it's basically a plot that wasn't good enough to kind of get an episode. So, you know, it's not as impactful as some of the other stuff going on. So why are we going back here instead of covering the big gap in time between Avatar and Korra? I understand to a degree if they get the impression that the fandom is not particularly into the direction that they're going in, because that's how I felt about like Imbalance. But there's clear stuff that you still have to cover, like Azula and all these other plot points. Aang finding the Sky Bison, Zuko finding the dragon egg, you know, it hatching Druk, setting up the Red Lotus at some point. All of that stuff has to happen in or around the time period we're in the comics. So why are they going back here to do this, like, likely not particularly important Katara story that I'm sure will be fun and entertaining, and it will be great to see Katara as the center point of a story. But she's been the center point of stories before. Why can't you do a Katara story on her own, set in a time period we're really, really interested in, that can offer something new? Whereas we already know what Katara's character arc is, and this will probably just add a slight new angle to the direction Katara was already heading in. And they're already setting up that, like, oh, it's just going to be Katara having to be tough while she's on a pirate ship. Which is, like, cool, but there's so much more important stuff in the franchise to cover at this point. And that's just my fear with this. Like, I am glad that this is just a one-shot book. Like, imagine this was a 3-part Katara and the Pirates story. I think everyone will be like, what are they doing? So, the hope here is that, like, this book will come and go. Whatever the next, like, one-shot book is, if there is going to be a next one-shot book, will be more interesting in that this opens the door to telling some fairly important stories given that it seems you're now allowing yourself the opportunity to do stories that don't have to feature like Aang and Katara and Sokka and Toph all on the cover together. You can have a book where it's just one of those characters on the cover. So can we do an Iroh book where it's just Iroh flashback? If we're going back, if we're allowed to go back all of a sudden, why don't we go all the way back before Avatar and cover some of the really important stuff? Can we get details about the Air Nomad genocide now that only the trading card game has ever covered? Can we cover details that happened before that even? All that sort of stuff. Can we cover backstory with, like I said, Iroh and Ozai and Azulon, and more about what happened in the war prior to the start of ATLA? That's the interest in going back, along with just the potential of going even further back to cover different avatars and so on. So I struggle to be like hyper excited about this, just because it isn't what I think a lot of fans have been sort of requesting and really, really wanting. It's not the direction I feel the comics need to go in. I hope this is just like an extra thing. I hope this is just an extra thing, and we likely do get announced what the next Avatar comic that's set like during the series actually is, like continuing on from Imbalance is. Because while I understand like it's getting a bit boring just following the slow and steady progress of Republic City without skipping ahead, maybe they are doing this as a little bit of a gap, a break, stopping the like slow steady progress where we're not skipping ahead too far, to create the gap for us to allow that time skip to happen. And when we finally return to the going forward in the comic stuff, it will be with the characters when they're older. Maybe that's what they're setting up right now. But this is where I think it's arguably not the best thing for this comic that it was announced in this way. I think if we do get an article explaining the whole thing with this, I assume it will get more of the direction of publishing for Avatar and Chorus stuff explained to us whenever that article, if there is one, comes out. I'm assuming this has just been announced a little bit early, but we'll see what's going on. So, okay, just to sort of finish up here, some thoughts on the cover itself. As usual, I continue to enjoy Peter Wortman's art. I still maintain that I think I do overall still prefer Team Guru-Hura's art, Michelle Wong's art, but this is still very good. Like, the way he draws Katara has always been very, very good, and I think her pose here with the martial arts pose here, I get the impression she is doing some water bending to sort of keep the boat on track. It's a strong kind of cover pose for Katara. And just, I suppose, the fact that like we don't get to see a lot of covers with just one character on the front. It is nice to kind of see a focus like this of like, oh look, it's like Katara in a way, like in command of a ship. And then seeing the art for the boat itself, I think looks pretty cool. Like there's obviously a very interesting design here with the boat. You can tell, I think just based off the front and the sides, that it's sort of like almost like transforms a little bit. Like you can tell those bits on the sides, maybe it is just normal, maybe those bits on the sides can come down. Maybe they've been on the front, the way the kind of chain you can see in the corner, it's almost like a ramp. Does it like come down? Is that how like the ship lands and comes off? It almost looks like it's some sort of a kind of lander like thing. It's not super clear, but it doesn't look like particularly like the front of any boat like I've personally seen. But again, I'm no expert on boats or anything like that. I think the main thing to focus on is the design on the front, though. Very clearly a distinctive design. It's there for a reason, I think, to relate to the plot. And when I look at that design, I think dragon. Because you can see the big fangs, which of course dragons have. The relatively big sort of like nose, the nostrils of the nose. If you look at a picture of some of the dragons in Avatar, they definitely have that feature. And then the kind of the design bit coming off the sign, almost like whiskers, but it's not really that, is also a feature of dragons. So is this like Fire Nation pirates or something like this? Could these be pirates from like one of the Fire Islands? I'm not entirely sure. But when I see it, I do think dragon, because it's got the sort of Fire Nation colors there as well. And I don't really know if it fits with another design, but we'll have to see when these pirates are introduced. This is maybe another thing to lead you down the path of like maybe these are different pirates than the ones we're familiar with in Avatar. But that's just my kind of very brief, like no context analysis of this cover. Is that very nice? Main thing to discuss though is the design on the front of the boat. So let me know what your thoughts are on this design. What do you think that design is? Do you agree with me that it's a dragon, or what? I think that's most of what I want to say. Like, I don't want to be overly negative, because look, I'm going to get this book, I'm going to read it, I'm likely going to at least enjoy it to a certain degree, because Katara is one of my favorite characters, and I don't think it's like just out and out bad that we're going back into ATLA. It's just that I feel there's so much more important stuff to do in Avatar than this. Is this even the best like time period of ATLA to jump into? Not necessarily. I think there's probably even some stuff in the gap between book 2 and 3 that you could cover that's probably more interesting than this. So we'll see where they go with it. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this, the delay for the Imbalance LIbrary Edition, but most importantly, your thoughts on this, the first one-shot Avatar graphic novel, Katara and the Pirate Silver. What are your thoughts on it and how it links into everything? What do you think the next announcements will be? This potentially opens the door to the next Korra comic also not necessarily being a 3-parter. It could be a one-shot book like this. We have to wait and see. I hope they have some of these other books ready to be announced at around the same time as this one is, I suppose, more officially announced. But we'll see. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.